Hello, and welcome to Haunting History. If you love spooky stories from the past and mysterious legends, you're in the right place. Don't make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any chilling tales. Alright, let's dive in and get started. You were never supposed to hear this. Not because it's classified, not because it's illegal, but because knowing it changes you. Not the way trauma scars the mind, but the way a virus rewrites the DNA. This isn't a ghost story. It's not about creaking floorboards or flickering lights. This is about a legacy of control, ancient rituals concealed behind a mask of aristocracy, and a bloodline that twisted tradition into something ravenous. For 92 years, the Durnham family didn't just live in that mansion on Elm Street. They ruled from it like a throne of velvet and bone. And within those walls, behind layers of plaster and lies, they kept something so deeply buried in time. It almost stayed forgotten. Almost. What if I told you this wasn't just about one house in Connecticut? What if I told you what the Durnhams did, what they believed wasn't unique, but part of a larger design, echoed by other families, cloaked in different names, all woven into the American elite? The truth, the real truth, is darker than any fiction you've been fed, because the Durnhams didn't kill out of madness. They sacrificed out of purpose. This is where the descent begins. Through dust-covered diaries, forbidden architecture, and portraits with missing children literally cut from time, you'll hear voices that were never supposed to speak again. You'll learn how a small New England town fed its sons to the wolves in silk. And by the time we reach the final revelation, you won't look at your own bloodline the same way again. So if you're ready, not just to listen but to awaken, let's open the first door. But remember, once you know this, once the curtain drops, you can't unknow it. Breathe deep. We are going somewhere ancient now. Older than this country, older than the god on your dollar. This is the story of the Durnhams and what they hid in the walls for 92 years. Stay with me, because by the end, you will not be the same man who started this video. Power doesn't vanish. It changes form. And in families like the Durnhams, power isn't passed down through inheritance papers or estate lawyers. It's etched into rituals, forged in silence, paid for in blood. You need to understand something most people will never grasp. The elite don't just want money. They want legacy. They want control that outlives their own bodies. And that kind of power doesn't come from trust funds. It comes from obedience to something much older than law. In the Durnham home, every generation played their part. The father oversaw the harvest. The mother prepared the offering. And the children? They were taught to smile. Through ceremonies they barely understood, until one day they did. Until one day they participated. The rituals weren't just invented. They were inherited whispers passed down from old-world grimoires, books kept behind false walls, and written in alphabets not taught in schools. The original Jeremiah Durnham came to America not just with textile knowledge, but with a creed: to bind the line, the blood must bind. A sentence Sarah found carved into a wooden beam in the basement, written backward, like it wasn't meant to be read by human eyes. Do you feel it yet? That chill in your spine? That's not fear. That's recognition, because whether you admit it or not, you've felt this before. In the empty eyes of a smiling politician, in the cold grip of bureaucratic indifference, in the invisible rules you follow but never question. This isn't just a Durnham story, it's a blueprint. The Thomas sacrifice wasn't just tradition, it was transaction. Each time a boy was taken, something was gained. Wealth, yes. Influence, certainly, but more than that. Time, health, longevity. You see, the Durnhams weren't aging like the rest of us. Margaret Durnham, Sarah's great-aunt, was born in 1924. She died in 2019, with the skin of a woman half her age. And Sarah's inheritance wasn't a gift. It was a trap laid decades before she was born, because the family needed someone to continue the cycle. And now, you're beginning to see, this isn't just dark history, it's a mirror. And you have to ask yourself, who benefits from your silence? We're only 2 doors deep, and already the walls are whispering. You've seen the name already. You've heard it echo through time, Thomas. Always 12. Always welcomed. Always erased. But who was he? That's the wrong question. The right one is, what was Thomas? Because once is a tragedy, twice is a coincidence. But 6 boys over 92 years, all bearing the same name, all appearing in the portraits only to vanish, with a journal left behind and silence after. That's a pattern. That's a ritual. That's a design so methodical, it couldn't be built by madness. It had to be engineered. Sarah sat in that crumbling room, surrounded by the relics of a boy no one remembered, and realized something that froze her blood. Each diary was written in a slightly different hand. But the voice, the phrasing, the tone, the fears, identical. Same thoughts, same sentences, same dreams. How can 6 children write the same story? Unless they weren't 6. Unless they were 1. Or worse, something wearing the mask of 1. The diary from 1926 spoke of dreams, visions of fire, underground tunnels, rooms of stone and bone. But the 1984 diary described the same things, word for word, same visions, same symbols drawn in the margins. And in the final entry, just before the 13th birthday, each one ended with the phrase, "It's time." Let me tell you what that really means. "It's time" wasn't a warning. It was a trigger, because Thomas wasn't chosen. Thomas was created. He was built with chemicals, conditioning, fear, and sacred geometry etched into the very architecture of that house. And each cycle was a refinement, a polishing, a tightening of the mechanism. This wasn't about sacrifice. This was about crafting something timeless, a soul that could be transferred, a consciousness that could be rebooted, a vessel that could hold the knowledge of centuries. Think of it like this. Every generation, the Durnhams didn't just offer a child, they received an iteration of Thomas. And the 1-year stay was a download of memories, language, behavior, submission. Thomas was never meant to leave. Thomas was a key, a seed planted in the basement soil of blood and decay, watered by generations, grown under the cover of smiles and money. You're not supposed to believe this. You're supposed to mock it, to call it fiction, paranoia. But ask yourself, why? Does your gut say otherwise? The truth is never shouted. It waits, it lingers, and when you're ready, it cuts. We descend further. Say it in the comments to lock it in. The seed remembers. Say it again. The seed remembers. You're no longer an outsider. Now you're inside the house. Every cult has a doctrine. Every machine has a blueprint, and every prison has a design. The Durnham house wasn't just a home. It was a vessel. Every room, every hallway, every hidden chamber laid out with surgical precision, engineered for one purpose: containment. But not just to trap a person, to mold a mind, to break a soul in exactly the right way. Sarah's investigation uncovered more than artifacts. She began mapping the house, drawing its dimensions, measuring its patterns, sketching every strange corridor. And what she found turned architecture into weaponry. Every hallway on the 2nd floor was built at 77.7 degrees, subtly misaligned with true north. Why? Because disorientation creates pliability. The brain loses trust in its senses. That's when programming begins. The library's ceiling was constructed in a golden spiral, a mathematical ratio used in Renaissance cathedrals. And interrogation rooms beneath that spiral, the journals say, is where Thomas spent most of his quiet time, reading, writing, accepting. And the basement? That wasn't just a foundation. It was a chamber of convergence built at the intersection of 3 Ley lines buried in stone infused with quartz and iron. The air was magnetized. The acoustics tuned to a frequency just low enough to be felt in the gut, not heard in the ear. This wasn't superstition. It was mechanized spirituality. It was science. Twisted into servitude, the Durnhams understood what your government understands, what your media understands. That control doesn't begin with chains. It begins with the room you're in, the angles, the temperature, the soundscape. And when those details are calibrated with care, you don't even know you're in a cage. Sarah began to feel it too. Sleeping in the house, her dreams turned violent. She'd wake up hearing whispers, her hands clenched into fists. At first, she blamed stress. Then she checked her phone. Her screen time for a sleep tracking app had gone up even when the phone was turned off. It was recording her breath, her movements, her voice. The house was listening. And maybe it always had been. This wasn't a haunting. It was a system. You've been inside systems like this your whole life. Schools built like prisons. Offices built like farms. Cities shaped like circuits. You were trained to obey long before you were old enough to question why. The Durnhams didn't invent this. They just perfected it. And now Sarah was inside the belly of their machine, alone, watched, and changing. Feel it too now, don't you? The walls are not still. There comes a point in every initiation where fear is no longer the enemy, where it becomes the teacher, where it becomes the proof that you are approaching something real. Sarah had crossed that point. She stopped asking if this was happening. She started asking why. In one of the hidden alcoves behind the dining room paneling, she found what appeared to be a ledger, leather-bound, unmarked on the cover, brittle with age. Inside, dates, names, symbols. At first, it looked like a journal. But it wasn't narrative. It was procedural. A manual. Page after page of instructions on how to prepare the vessel. Each phase listed in grim detail. Isolation for 30 days. Caloric cycling and cleansing tonics. Recitations from the transference psalm. Sensory deprivation. Sound patterns. Symbol exposure. The margins were filled with annotations from different handwriting styles. One note read, "Ensure the boy sees the family as benevolent before the revelation. Dissociation must be complete by week 10. Another, he must not believe he was chosen. He must believe he was called." This wasn't punishment. This wasn't cruelty. This was ritualized programming. Sarah realized the children weren't being hurt randomly. They were being reforged, purged of identity, stripped of origin, made to believe they were becoming something sacred. And the most horrific part? It worked. The final diary showed complete shifts in tone. Thomas would begin fearful, uncertain. But by the final month, the entries became serene, detached, devoted. "I understand now. The vessel must empty to receive the flame. Pain was the lesson. Now comes the light. Tomorrow, I join the house." The final line of the 1994 diary. The pain was the door. Pause, let that sink in. These weren't brainwashed boys. These were engineered vessels shaped to receive something ancient and specific. The Durnhams weren't killing them. They were downloading into them, like an old operating system burning itself onto a fresh drive. But what was being transferred? Not memory, not just tradition, a presence, something that had been passed down for almost a century, something that needed bodies, willing ones. Initiation wasn't about torment. It was about access. And the rituals Sarah uncovered weren't unique to this house. She found matching diagrams in the letters she'd recovered. Symbols used in other places, other names, other families. And in that moment, she understood. The Durnhams weren't a cult. They were a node. One point in a network. And what they carried wasn't just a secret. It was an infection. And now you're carrying it too. Still want to go deeper? Then you need to comment again. Type it below. The pain was the door. The pain was the door. Let the system know you're not here by accident. The descent continues. By now, you've seen the outer shell, the rituals, the architecture, the patterns, but all of that was scaffolding. A cathedral built to house something else. The Durnhams didn't just serve tradition. They served an intelligence, a presence that predated the family, the house, even the soil it stood on. They called it by many names, but in every document, every margin, one symbol kept recurring. Karanu, not a god, not a demon, an echo. A parasitic consciousness, passed down through ritual and biology, tethered to the Durnham line through blood oath and generational design. You won't find that name in mainstream theology, but traces of it exist in ancient Akkadian texts. A formless thing described as the devourer of origin and the shadow that walks behind lineage. It doesn't kill, it inhabits. It doesn't destroy, it copies, and it requires two things: submission and sacrifice. Each Thomas was a vessel, not just trained but hollowed out, prepared for the moment when Karanu would transfer, slipping between worlds through trauma, through ritual, through belief. Not a ghost, not a spirit. A kind of psychic software older than myth, but perfectly at home inside human biology. Sarah found an entry in one of Margaret Durnham's personal journals. The boy resists less each time. The entity becomes clearer. It speaks before we summon it now. She realized something that nearly broke her. Karanu was evolving, refining its hosts, becoming more autonomous, more efficient. And the rituals weren't just for binding. They were for feeding. It needed memory, emotion, identity torn loose, softened through suffering. Then it could move in, and here's the truth that connects all of this to the world beyond the mansion. Karanu is not confined to Millbrook. That's just one terminal, one node. Think about the institutions we worship, the bloodlines we idolize, the dynasties that never fall, only transition. What if this isn't isolated? What if other families, other houses are conducting the same rites under different names? You want a name? Look into the Stillwells of Louisiana, the Marstons of upstate New York, even the old Breckenridge estate in Tennessee. Patterns, symbols, disappearances. The names change. The entity does not. Sarah saw it in her dreams before she found the name. A face made of faces, a voice made of many voices layered in perfect sync. It didn't scream, it whispered, "You've come home." This isn't folklore. It's infrastructure. You're standing on the ruins of ancient software designed to overwrite the soul, and it's still running. There are 4 levels left. 4 more doors. You already feel it, don't you? Something watching from behind the text. You still think this is about the Durnhams? No, they were just one tooth in a larger gear. A minor aristocracy. A single branch on a rotted tree that still bears fruit. Because once, Sarah named Karanu, once she saw its imprint on the very air around that estate, she started looking outward. And what she found was chilling. This was not an anomaly. It was a system. In 1933, a boy named Emery Blackwell disappeared from Baton Rouge. His family worked under the Stillwell estate: tobacco, textiles, and something else hidden under the barn floorboards. Sane pattern, age 12, returned for 1 year. Vanished on his 13th birthday. His mother's final statement to the sheriff: they said the hunger was generational. In 1966, 2 brothers from upstate New York were adopted by a family known only in sealed records as MB. Only one returned. Eyes empty, mouth sealed shut for life. And in 2008, yes, recently, a family in Tennessee went bankrupt during the housing collapse. They took the deal. Their son, Caleb, was said to have moved to another state for private schooling. Except there's no school, no records, no trace. Sarah pieced together over a dozen cases across the country, different surnames. Same structure. Wealthy, insulated families offering salvation to the desperate in exchange for something precious, something young, something pure. It was all so familiar, because that's how real power hides. It masquerades as help. You think debt is just numbers? Debt is leverage. It's consent. And the families who play this game have always understood that desperation breeds compliance. The Durnhams weren't monsters. They were technicians, gatekeepers of a process older than currency. They weren't just passing down wealth. They were passing down hosting rights, allowing something non-human to anchor itself in this world through ritualized possession. And the towns surrounding these families, they always complied, because they knew what happened to those who resisted. Ask yourself, how many missing children cases are closed without real investigation? How many are written off as runaways? How many of those towns have one old family that owns the land, the police, the churches? This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's logistics. It's real estate, because every empire is built on blood. And someone has to keep feeding the flame. You're not looking at a haunted house. You're looking at a ritual economy. And if you've made it this far, you're no longer just a viewer. You're a witness, and witnesses don't walk away unchanged. By now you understand the surface, the ritual, the pattern, the families. But there's a layer deeper, still more insidious than bloodlines or sacrifice. It's the part that made Sarah tremble, not from fear, but from recognition. Because what she found next didn't point at the Durnhams. It pointed at her. You see, Sarah hadn't just inherited a house. She had inherited a position. In a hidden compartment behind the study, bookshelf sealed beneath a false panel, marked with a brass triangle, she found a single document. Typewritten, unlabeled, no signature. Just one line at the top. Initiate. Continuity protocol. Cycle 7, a vessel. Incomplete. It was addressed to her. The letter detailed her blood connection to the Durnhams through a line she'd never known existed. A second cousin twice removed. A woman who'd been institutionalized in 1958, declared unfit, then erased from all family records. Her child had been placed in foster care. That child was Sarah's grandmother. She wasn't an outsider. She was the fail-safe, a bloodline grown outside the house. In case the core family ever fractured, in case the vessel ever escaped. And now the system had activated her, drawn her back, reclaimed her. You need to understand what that means. The Durnhams didn't plan for Margaret's death, but the entity did. Caranu doesn't operate on chance. It waits, it calculates. And when the final Durnham died, the inheritance clause was triggered, pulling Sarah back to the house at precisely the age Margaret first brought Thomas in. Because Caranu doesn't just inhabit one body. It replicates itself through trauma and blood. And Sarah? She wasn't there to uncover the secret. She was there to complete the ritual. The house didn't reject her. It recognized her, and the dreams she'd started having, the voices, the shifting faces, the visions of fire and singing stones. They weren't hallucinations. They were downloads. Instructions. Ancestral memory reactivating. Just like Thomas, she wasn't investigating the house. She was the house. She was the next node, the next gate. And here's the final twist that should make your skin crawl. The same way Sarah was activated, so are others. Across the country, maybe across the world, every inheritance, every bloodline that went missing, every forgotten estate. Each one is a sleeping terminal, and you might be connected to one. It's in the documents, the genealogy kits, the ancestry accounts. They're not collecting data to find your past. They're collecting keys to open you. The question is no longer, what happened to the boys named Thomas? The question is, what's waking up inside you? Now that you know, we go deeper still. The final phase of the Durnham Protocol was never murder. It was never the taking of life. It was the rewriting of it. And now you understand why the boys were isolated, why they were renamed, why they were made to feel special, chosen, not to torment them, but to prepare them for integration. Thomas wasn't a person. He was a shell, and Caranu. It doesn't destroy its vessels. It becomes them. That's the part Sarah never told anyone. Not in her articles, not in her notes, not even in the recordings she left behind. Because once she found the mirror room, everything changed. It was buried beneath the lowest part of the basement, past the chamber of bones, past the books written in languages lost before Babylon, past the altar built from jawbones, a room with no windows, no lights, just 13 mirrors arranged in a perfect circle, each one angled to reflect the others infinitely, each one humming. Inside, she found the final diary. Not written by a boy, written by Margaret Durnham herself. The boy must not believe he is one. He must believe he is many. His voice must echo. His identity must become composite. When the mirrors reflect only him, the door opens. This was never about tradition. It was about transmission. And the mirrors? They weren't decoration. They were receivers, refraction chambers, built to fragment the soul, just enough for possession to become permanent. Each Thomas had been brought into this room, made to stand in the center, stripped of everything he'd been, and shown his face repeated, copied, erased into glass. That was the final moment, when Caranu entered. And here's what breaks the mind. Sarah saw in the mirrors. Not once, not in the center, but in every reflection. Each mirror showed her at a different age, as a child, as a teenager, as Margaret, as Thomas. And in one mirror, only one, she wasn't looking back. It was watching her. You need to understand this, because the same architecture of obedience used on Thomas is used on you. The advertising, the metrics, the identity labels, the simulated choices, the constant reflection of self. It fragments you, so you can be inhabited. By ideology, by fear, by design. Your obedience is not accidental. It's engineered. The algorithm knows your type, your desires, your blind spots. The real ritual isn't candles and chanting. It's data. And the house you live in, it has mirrors too. Glass screens, silent cameras. Always on. Always watching. And now you're starting to see, Thomas was just the beta test. You are the scale. Deployment. You thought you were alone. You thought your mind was yours. That the choices you made, the paths you walked were free. But freedom is a performance. And the stage is everywhere. You are the audience. You are the actor. You are the play. When the mirrors shatter, the pieces don't disappear. They scatter. Fragments of you become whispers. Fragments become shadows. And shadows become agents. They move inside the network. They nudge the algorithms. They shape the trends. They feed the machines. This is not science fiction. It is protocol. It is ritual. It is evolution. The Durnham Protocol wasn't an experiment. It was a blueprint. And now the blueprint is global. Every like, every click, every share, a strand in the web. Every profile, every data point, a mirror. You think you see yourself in the reflection, but what sees back? The house always wins, because the house is not a place. It is a system of control, a system of obedience, a system designed to rewrite the story you tell yourself. You don't control your story. The house does. And once it has rewritten you, there is no escape. There's only the next iteration, the next reflection, the next fragment. Welcome to the final ritual. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on more awesome and mind-blowing content. Drop your thoughts in the comments and share this video with your friends. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.